The time is 7:30. I call the June 4th meeting of Yardley Borough Council to order. Please stand for the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please, Patty.
Ms. Thompson?
Present.
Ms. Scherer? Ms. Siegel-Morris? Mr. Applebaum?
Here.
Mr. Stump?
Here.
Mr. Stump?
Present.
Mr. Feiner?
Present.
And Mr. Carlson?
Present.
Mr. Feiner? And Mr. Carlson?
Present. It's a long way.
Okay.
It's going in a loop.
We had that happen before. You fixed it somehow.
He's delayed laughing. Anyone joining us online, just give us one moment while we work out some telecommunication kinks. We good? Is it going to keep reverbing, or are we okay? All right. Yeah, it seems good. Perfect. Are there any community announcements this evening about upcoming events? I know there are a ton of upcoming events, so anyone from the table? Or online?
I'm sorry, from the table?
Yes.
Oh, did you have anything before I go?
Oh.
Okay. Three things. We have a Pride Month celebration, 6 o'clock in front of Borough Hall on June 11th. We have a Juneteenth celebration on June 19th in front of Borough Hall at 6 p.m. And this weekend on the 8th, is that right? Or is it? Yes, that's right. At the near the corner of Afton and River Road, which is the celebration of the completion of the Delaware River Watershed Cleanup Project, funded through a grant from the American Water Charitable Foundation with assistance from the Delaware River Greenway Partnership. That will be at 2 o'clock. Are you going to talk about the?
Sure.
Okay. I will Michelle.
Sorry. Yes, there is prior to the 2 o'clock event, there is a ribbon cutting at 12 at Millie's. Have been working very hard since February when they bought it to fix it up, and it's just wonderful. They came out with a new menu. It's really wonderful. So that's at 12, and then at 1 o'clock is the occasional flowers, just down the short distance down the street from Millie's, and they're having their ribbon cutting at 1.
Excellent. Busy week for all. Any other announcements from the table or online? Hearing none, this is the portion of the meeting where I am required to open the floor, regardless of whether or not we have any public present, where members of the public can approach and make comment about items not on the agenda. Please keep your comments to 4 minutes. Going once, going twice. We will move on to consideration of the consent agenda dated June 4th, 2024. It includes approval of minutes dated May 21st, event permit for the LGBTQ plus Pride Month celebration on June 11th in front of Borough Hall, event permit for Juneteenth celebration on June 19th in front of Borough Hall, event permit for Tai-Chi in the Park-Buttonwood once weekly, consideration of FEMA-funded 93 North Delaware Ave elevation payment certificate number 3, and consideration of FEMA-funded 93 North Delaware Ave elevation payment certificate number 2. Does any member of council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Okay, I guess I'll ask to have the two events, LGBTQ plus and the Juneteenth celebrations polled, please?
And I will ask that the minutes be voted on separately, since
Thank
I
you.
was absent. All right, hearing no other requests, I would entertain a motion to approve items D through F.
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion was made by Councilperson Siegel Morris, seconded by Councilperson Finer. Any discussion from council? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries, I think, 7-0. Was that an aye, Jared? Great. Next, we'll move on to approval of the minutes dated May 21st, 2024. Do I hear a motion to approve as submitted?
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion was made by Councilperson Carlson, seconded by Councilperson Scherer. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, not aye for me. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-0-1. Event permit LGBTQ Pride Month celebration on June 11th in front of Borough Hall. Do I hear a motion to approve as submitted?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Motion was made by Councilperson Siegel Morris, seconded by Councilperson Scherer. Discussion, please.
I'm not sure. I thought Jared wanted to speak on this. No? Okay, then I will. Just a short or a quick question on the process, and forgive me for my naivety, of how we bill for certain services for events like this. In particular, I am referring to the cost of police for this event. I understand and graciously thank the chief for reducing the cost from the minimum of 4 to 1 hour, but I'm still a little bit confused on what the process is to determine which events need police coverage and, how it's billed, I guess, is what I'm looking for. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to catch you off guard, Chief.
I was under the impression that you and Mr. Foraker had great conversations on this, so I wasn't prepared to speak on it, but
I'm sorry.
I can. Or someone in Mr. Foraker had conversations on this. Whenever an event is not sponsored or co-sponsored by the municipality, those who host it are required to pay for the police services in a minimum of 4-hour increments. As you indicated there, we showed some grace here by reducing that down to a 1-hour minimum, and the borough will have to pay the other 3 hours of that minimum to get police officers in. How it's determined when we will need police and when we will not, I review that with Mr. Foraker. I believe both these events warrant at least some police coverage. I stand by that. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, well,
Or if you have concerns.
do you
as
want me
why
to
we need
take it
police coverage.
offline then, I guess?
I'll be happy to discuss it here if you have a question as to why it needs police coverage.
Well,
Comment from Mr. Finer?
Well, I think the question I just want to clarify, just for future reference, when an event requires police coverage, that means that we're hiring an additional officer, or we use the, so in other words, you wouldn't tie up an existing officer because then you don't have one available.
Correct.
So it is a cost to the borough.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
We have one officer routinely. We used to have two when we had part-timers that had availability. That's diminishing rapidly. So we're generally running this town with one police officer per shift. And it's got a whole host of concerns I won't even bring up tonight, but it's got concerns.
I do want to make a quick comment, having attended the celebrations last year. The crowds were, I think, larger than anyone anticipated, which is wonderful. They were spilling out into the street. We did have people drive by at both events that shouted slurs from their trucks. If you Google Pride events, Pride rallies, as well as Juneteenth rallies, it is a common source of violence and anti-protesters or the people against the celebrations that are occurring. So I think there was probably some risk analysis that went into this, but I just do want to underscore that I went last year. It was an extremely large crowd, and I did observe some aggression from people who were not part of the crowd driving by.
And I would like to add that, and yes, there was large crowds but already this season, we have the pride bows have been placed on all the ducks, and the one on Fitzgerald Field had the bow stolen for whatever, maybe somebody really wanted a bow or someone didn't want the bow there. So I feel like there is maybe perhaps aggression towards that community in the area.
I'm actually, sorry, Madam President. I'm a little bit shocked because not that anyone has to owes me any explanation, but I wasn't even aware that that had happened, and I wish I knew. And I am sorry that the bows were stolen from the duck. The one was stolen from the duck, because then maybe I would have thought a little bit differently about pulling this from the consent agenda. But this gives me a little bit better clarity because I didn't know about that. Can I ask one other question, though, Chief, just about the cost to the borough? Since we're what's a better word than eating? We are
We are funding the remainder of the
funding the
time.
remainder of it. What fund does it come from? And maybe we should, if we really think that they, under the circumstances in the future, that they need to pay for police coverage, then yeah, I'm not opposed to having them pay the whole thing.
Well, we will fund the other 3 hours because we can't get people in for less than that, and we will have them do enforcement activities related to our needs.
Okay,
So we will pay for what we get.
I see. Okay, because what I was saying, I guess, was that I don't want you to feel that you have to make that concession if it's for someone else's event and, it's costing the borough more money. That's the point I was trying to make.
Okay.
So in the past, for police coverage on private sponsored events like Music on Main, back when I was more involved, you would get a business sponsor to pay for the police coverage as well as pay for the bands, or there are some committees under council like Parks and Rec that have money that you could ask them to sponsor. So there are some avenues for paying for the police coverage that I think would make the folks sponsoring feel like they are supported by the community and we're not trying to take money from them. All that said, what I'm hearing from you, Councilperson Applebaum, is some sort of process document would be helpful to you on yes, police coverage, no police coverage when you're submitting, and I think that's something we can do. Otherwise, any other comments on this?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That is part of, I was speaking with Wes today, and he does want to talk about the permitting process for the upcoming year and what goes into that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ori.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to the police department and chief to finding a way to make use of the other 3 hours and that's, a substantial concession. So it's appreciated.
Agreed. So I'll call the question on this.
I just wanted to finish. I apologize. I just wanted to say, to be clear, that my intention of pulling it out and asking these questions was merely to get better insight and not a criticism of anybody or any process. But clarity would be great because, again, just to finish off, I didn't know about those incidents. So thank you, Chief. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'll call the question. All those in favor, we're voting on the Pride Month celebration first. Please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Now
I think he was saying yay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry.
That's the second delay.
I would entertain a motion to approve the event permit for Juneteenth on June 19th.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Motion was made by Councilperson Applebaum, seconded by Councilperson Scherer. Discussion? Okay, I think it probably the same comments here, maybe? Or why do we pull this one?
No, I think we should just vote, if you don't mind, we could vote on it.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Police chief's report, please.
Thank you, ma'am. I have police service statistics for May 2024. In May 2024, the police department handled 647 calls for service, issued 7 parking tickets, issued 74 moving traffic violations, investigated 8 motor vehicle accidents, and made 4 arrests, 2 of which involved DUIs. And that concludes my report, ma'am.
Thank you. You have before you the finance report from June 4th. Any issues or questions? Otherwise, it will be accepted by consensus of council. Patty, do you have a manager's report to give? Excellent.
So I have the report for May. The PICO agreement has been signed by all. Phase 1 environmental
I want to
assessment.
clap for that. Yay.
The Phase 1 environmental assessment should begin shortly and be completed in 45 days from a final settlement, completed in 45 days with a final settlement 70 days from when the agreement was signed. Right to knows have continued to increase. We received 23 requests in May. Several are still being worked on, and a 30-day extension has been requested because of the amount of documents they entail. We have one that's in appeal in Harrisburg. Zoning, we had 11 zoning applications received. This also includes 1 new business at 31 North Delaware. No zoning hearing board in May. We had 9 building permits, 3 UNOs, 7 trash certificates. We're still waiting for the real estate transfer tax for May. And last thing is that we'll be attending the Bucks County Consortium meeting this Friday. And that's my report.
Are you entertaining questions?
Sure.
I heard you speak about right-to-know requests. Do you have a dollar amount connected to that?
What, I have April's, May's bill's not in yet. I have a year-to-date amount,
Okay, I'll take that.
about 7,000, a
And
little
we've,
over 7,000.
we've allocated 15,000 for the year, is my understanding.
I believe so.
And we're in June, so that's 6 months, so,
Well, that was through April, only through.
oh, sorry, you're
Yeah,
right.
this is just, yeah.
This could be, so, obviously, I have a concern about, right-to-know requests and whether they're done with thoughtfully, and to ask those who are pulling right-to-know requests to think carefully about whether they can get that information from another source, or even just come into Borough Hall and see if you can get the information without pulling the right-to-know request. I don't know what they might be asking about. Because, the Madam President's right, if this is up to April and we're at June now, so it's a little worrisome that we may be going over the allocated amount for right-to-know requests, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other questions on the manager's report? Thank you, Ms. Sargent. Moving on to engineer's report.
Thank you. We've issued our engineer's report to council. Should be included in your packet. Are there any questions from council? No? Okay. Moving on, we could talk about the request for a scope change for the engineering services for Phase 3 sidewalk. And earlier today, I forwarded that over to council members. And what, just to give a background of this, is back in 2022, we had our original base proposal approved by council in January of 2022. Included within there, we had a total project amount of $161,000. And to date, we have invoiced about $108,000. We have some remaining tasks in that base contract to work through, and $34,000 of that has been allocated for construction inspection services. And what we had was also approximately $8,000 targeted for bid solicitation as well. So of our base contract, a fair portion of it is reserved for once we get out to bid and into construction administration. So within the request is for additional design effort as well as permitting effort through PennDOT as well. We have budgeted for 2 submissions to PennDOT for that work, and if there's any questions, be happy to answer them.
Can I make a comment?
So should we have a motion on the table and then we can discuss? Does that sound good? Okay, do I hear a motion to accept the proposal for engineering services for Phase 3 sidewalks?
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion was made by Councilperson Finer, seconded by Councilperson Scher. Discussion.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One, I think it's important in deciphering this that we have a 10%, both grants allow for 10% engineering. So I'm going to share some things that I learned. One of them is it doesn't mean it's going to cost 10%, and many projects cost more than 10%. But this proposal actually keeps us within the 10% allotted by the next grant. And one difference between the 2 grants is that the second grant includes some additional crosswalks that were not in the first grant, and it's funded for that. So when you hear the design work, we did make the decision to stick with the original design after the exploration we did and the due diligence, but there is additional design work for the additional crosswalks. The second thing I'll just mention is that there are some questions that I know some of us still have just regarding billing, transparency around billing, and control of overages. And I think we'll work through that, but this could come back to council with the revision. It could go to executive session. I don't know where that's going to go, but we may see this again. So I'll just say that, but I would recommend, from what I've seen, my recommendation is to go ahead and approve this estimate.
I have a question. This is an unfunded operation. We don't have this money. So if we agree to spend this, where are we getting the money from?
We shouldn't spend, this is from the grant, so we should not spend anything the grant is not finalized,
Go
right?
from 160 to 214.
Right, it's coming from the second grant. So after the 108 that was spent, 57 of it, is that right? Because the first grant was 570,000. That means 10% of that, 57, was refunded from that grant. The second grant isn't executed yet. So that means, and I'm also catching up on this, but that means that the money that was spent in 2022 beyond the 57,000, and I just want to confirm with the engineer, that these grants do not allow us to go backwards and recoup that.
Correct. As we, with coordination with Manager Johnson, we were checking on that to make sure with this new grant, and we're still waiting for the executed grant. So Mr. Finer and I talked about it too, is potentially having approval of this scope change conditional upon receiving the executed grant, which we haven't received so far. And when we go through the grant, we did talk about the engineering as our breakdown is you're permitted 10% maximum of that amount for that grant. So we're arranging there's also a contingency of this new grant. So the new grant in the amount of $1,031,452 is what we're waiting on right now. So how the engineering went through is the engineering was 10% of the construction cost was $93,768.76. And when we were discussing it, Mr. Finer and I, the contingency budget was $44,600 $1,051. So if we look at the total sum of the $1,031,000, 10% of that is $103,000. So the engineering recoup cost, depending upon our construction bid amount, is what we're looking for as well. So we were looking for the $93,000 as we were looking, what do we have remaining to do to complete this project?
So are you also saying that back in January of '22, when this 160,000 number was approved, we knew then that that was more than what was available for engineering with the first grant?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think that was clearly known to people at the time, in my opinion. I don't think so. Because what we were saying then is we were going over significantly and kept the spigot open to keep doing engineering work greater than the terms of the contract that we had. So that's worrisome. And then my other two, I'll just have two other comments on this short term. I would like to see this not be voted on tonight. Number one, this proposal came in about 3 hours ago. Manager Johnson hasn't even seen it, as far as I know. I think it needs some work on it, how we're going to construct that contract so that we don't go over, and make sure it can all be done within the monies that we have.
Just a thought that maybe we could make this contingent upon execution of the grant, which we know provides for that amount of money. In other words, if the grant provides for 103 and we make the approval of this contingent upon that, then, one matches the other.
Talk to us, Ori or Patrick, about timeline. So to Don's point, we did get this today. I read it a couple times, but beyond that, falls away on business. So what does our timeline look like if we wait until the next meeting, or if we wait until execution of the grant? Like, how do those compare to voting on it tonight?
Regarding our timeline, what we had of our milestone schedule was we were hoping to receive the executed grant end of May, which isn't there yet. So we had a couple line items of working on our drawings for 4 months from June to September is what we had, and included in there is the required survey. So all we do is, if we rediscuss it in June, in the workshop meeting or in July, we'll just update the milestone schedule on that premise.
One thing I want to just say about that, that's new information that I have, which is that Lower Makefield seems serious about doing the Taylorsville Road sidewalk, which is the extension of the sidewalk, and the time frame is similar to ours. So if we could go to bid at the same time that they go to bid, potentially there's economies of scale there in part of that project. Plus, we could potentially attract different contractors because a $1 million or $1.6 million project might become a $4 million project or something. So like I said, I think this is subject to, we don't have to, I don't want to hold this back, but at the same time, I think it certainly makes sense to continue to tighten what we have. But I'm worried about holding it back and missing that boat for bidding, for going out to bid in the winter.
I have a question. So we're talking about milestones. Are we talking about the milestones that were presented at last meeting? Or are we talking about a different set of milestones that go with the original plan? I don't know.
The milestone schedule was what Mr. Feiner presented during our workshop meeting. We were creating a preliminary schedule that is what we were looking for.
But for that plan with the buffer, I thought.
Going back is maybe one thing, is also further discussions with Public Works, is we're going back to the current design of what we presented and what we were working on with PennDOT, with the exception of adding the additional crosswalks at Jerview, at McKinley, and at Dolington. So those 3 additional crosswalks are also included in this additional scope.
And just to clarify, those were in the second grant, but not the first grant.
Correct.
We have to spend the construction money on those. Like, we have to basically do it to get the engineering money.
So the cost of the redesign is coming, that we aren't using, is coming out of which grant?
The cost of which design?
The redesign that we are no longer using is coming out of which grant? Is
That right now is not payable.
Okay.
Yeah, as right now, as we could, for the current grant we have, is we could request $57,000.
So the redesign didn't cost anything?
No, that redesign is listed as your, in the scope change, that is the task 2 item.
And that's not being paid for from a grant?
No, that cannot be recouped for the grant.
Okay.
Maybe if that grant comes in with the date of May or when they announced it in April, but I can't be certain on that.
Is that something that we could request of them to date the grant? Do they have full discretion, or is that something that they're open to conversation? Because they want us to do the work.
I would suggest asking that question to Manager Johnson. She's been coordinating with the CED.
And I know she's working on that. I just thought you
Yes.
would know, but yeah, okay.
Okay, so if we'd like to amend the motion to connect it with the execution of the grant, then the person who made the motion, Councilperson Finer, and the person who seconded it would have to amend and then second, or we could vote this down, which would indicate we do not want to vote on it until we have more time to review. So either way is fine with me.
I'll go ahead and make the amendment to the motion to make it contingent upon execution of the grant.
I second it.
Thank you. Amended motion was made by Councilperson Finer and seconded by Councilperson Scherer. Any further discussion?
Well, I'll just add to that. That gives us more time naturally, because I don't know when the grant will finish, but presumably the other question we have about billing could be resolved at the same time as while we're just waiting, without having to wait for another vote, if we're good with this.
Sounds good. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right.
Abstentions? I'm not sure what Jared did.
I think the hand is up. I don't know what that means.
Can we get a chat of what his vote was? Was it a abstain?
That's what I think he said.
Okay, so, yes, abstain, okay. Motion carries 5-1-1. Solicitors report, please, or do you have anything further?
No, that concludes my
Thank you.
portion.
Solicitors report.
Yes, good evening. There's a couple things before you tonight on the solicitor's report. The first is approval of a resolution for a master lease agreement, which is to obtain financing to purchase a 2023 Ford Police Interceptor with upfitting from Fred Breen's of Doylestown. The total purchase price is $56,368.48. The master lease agreement that's been reviewed and approved by my office provides for 4 payments of $16,259.95 at an interest rate of 5.98%. Each of those 4 payments of the $16,000 are made on May 28th, beginning in 2025, 2026, 2027, and 2028. So as I mentioned, we reviewed and approved the master lease agreement. So if you're inclined to take a motion on the resolution to approve, as far as the need for the vehicle, I suppose the chief could provide more detail if you have any questions.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 24-05 Master Lease Agreement?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, motion was made by Councilperson Siegel Morris, since it's public safety related, but you're both on public safety, seconded by Councilperson Scherer. Discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously, I believe.
So the second item is just an extension of the license for right-of-way agreement at Delaware Canal State Park with the DCNR. That current right-of-way agreement expires on June 9th, 2024. If a letter's not submitted requesting an extension. So basically, I'm just asking for a vote to approve the borough engineer, myself, and Paula to draft a letter and send it out, basically requesting that extension for a period of time that we'll decide is appropriate to allow the completion of construction. My understanding is Mr. Feiner and Mr. Foley had a meeting with the DCNR, was it earlier this afternoon, to discuss it, and that everybody's basically on the same page at this point, but I'll allow you to explain in more detail.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to extend the license agreement?
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion was made by Councilperson Feiner, seconded by Councilperson Scherer. Would we like to discuss that meeting at all, or?
Sure. Yeah, so there's just back and forth on some details there. One of the things is about the ramp. We had certain understanding when we were approved to construct it, and that seemed to shift a little bit as far as what they want now. So what they're really asking for is to paint the ramp, which we had concerns about because we don't want it to be more slippery. So we're going to work through that and figure out a way to satisfy that request and not create a danger situation. And with the railings, it was a similar kind of thing. One solution to move the railings inbound creates another problem. We're going to work with our internal code enforcement to see if we can come up with some sort of solution there, and they were open to whatever our code enforcement agreed with. So we're moving forward. We just need the extra time to resolve those last things on the punch list. I'll mention also that I mentioned to them the property owners there, as well as several others along the canal, dissatisfaction with the level of water in the canal while I was speaking to them.
While you had them?
Well, I had their attention, and unfortunately, I don't have any further information. It would be really nice to get, we understand the repairs being done, it would be really nice to get some sort of schedule timeline from them, and I wonder if we can ask for that, maybe in combination with other municipalities, and try to get some semblance of what's going on. I think people could really appreciate that.
So as far as the other items on this letter, were there not guidelines as to where the handrails should be installed? And what about the regrading that needs to be done? And the sloughing of this towpath, or what, are those all being addressed right now?
Should I respond? Sure. Yeah. We were not given guidelines. We installed an ADA, commercial ADA grade ramp, and we actually bought additional railings. If you recall the original, and I mentioned this to DCNR, the original plan had steps with no railing. So our view is we're making it better. But you know how it is, different people see it and then new concerns arise, and I think we're in that situation. So I think we'll work through it. I don't think it's a big deal. It's just a matter of getting all on the same page.
So, I'm sorry, Madam President, can I ask?
Please.
Mr. Feiner a question? So, does this punch list, is it going to be retained as, stay as it is now, or was there any resolution in this meeting that you had?
We still have to work through the items. Yeah, that's why we're asking for an extension, and yeah.
Just out of curiosity, because you didn't mention it, what's the purpose of painting the rails?
Good.
Were the,
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me when I took a picture of it, like last week, now that it's weathered a bit, both sides look the same, but, and I did ask DCNR, is there other guidelines that we could look at? And there was nothing. There's just basically, they approve it or they don't approve it. Beyond that, maybe you can issue an RTK to find out, but that's all I know. And they said it's got to match either the decking or the color of the bridge, which is brown. So either like dark gray or brown. It's silver, but the concrete doesn't match either of those either. So I can't tell you. All I know is what they want.
One last question. My understanding is this is the west side of the bridge, right? And that's on our property or the
Yeah.
homeowner's property?
That's a good question. That came up also. I asked that because I was kind of curious, is this really in the ROW? So what I was told is that generally the right-of-way for DCNR is 8 feet from the high water line. Now, I didn't go out there and measure it, so I don't know if it's in. If it turns out that it's not in the right-of-way, then presumably the whole thing is on private property with an easement. That may open up a Pandora's box of problems. I don't really know. I don't know if the solicitor wants to say anything about that. But I think we don't want to get this involved into a legal thing because it's much cheaper to paint a ramp than pay for 20 hours of legal.
The homeowner is very supportive of this project.
Absolutely.
And I think I can't speak for him, of course, but
Yeah.
I believe that he wants to see this.
Right. So the question to the solicitor is, what happens if it turns out this entire ramp is outside of the right-of-way of DCNR?
Then it would be subject to the property rights of whoever's property it's located on.
And how would we find that out? Because I asked about that, and they mentioned an exhibit, but I looked at the exhibit. There's nothing that indicates where they are.
Yeah, so I can take a look at the exhibit and also the property records for the property and see if I can come up with an answer of where it's actually located.
Do we want to do that?
I think it's probably beneficial that we know who owns what and who's responsible for what.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably something we should have on record.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that update. Anything else on this item before we vote on it? I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? I think the motion carries unanimously. We'll skip over the mayor's report, council member reports. Councilperson Siegel Morris.
EY, I hope everybody is aware, Music Off Main is starting Father's Day weekend, and as well as the Sunday concerts. The trademarks have been secured for, I think, Canaloween and Carvathon. Public safety is then scheduled to do a working session next meeting in which we'll probably talk about the permitting process, new stop signs going up, fire hydrant valve replacements, I'm paraphrasing Wes, and maybe possible additions like retro-reflective tape to stop signs or pedestrian crossing signs to make them more visible.
Thank you. Councilperson Finer.
Okay, so we've worked through some of my updates, so what I'll give you that is left is the North Main property, we've started to call that a garden of reflection. Where that's at is the property owner, we're working through the sale agreement, to the solicitor, and the property owner, the donor of the property, would like it to be a garden of reflection and to stay that way. But that's subject to receiving a zoning variance because it's not zoned for that use. I would think that the community would be supportive of that because the alternate is that there would be a building, a structure there, which would be worse for flooding. That's what people don't want. So, but we have to go through the process of doing that. And so that requires kind of getting a basic level of idea of what's going to be there. Not going to be much there, but something there so that can be put through zoning. So we're in the process of figuring out what it is that the minimal, that part that zoning would require to be able to consider it. And so that's moving along. And the other issue I have is just an update with the vape ordinance. I don't actually have an update about the ordinance, except that I need a better map because I'm trying to do this online, and it's not working as well as I thought. I have some, I'm just working on myself with it before I get it further down the road. Perhaps I could get something from the borough. Manager Johnson's not here, but there's a better map that we can use for this type of purpose.
That shows what properties are what.
Yeah, that's a two-scale
Zoning
map.
districts?
No, just the actual map of the borough with very good, like a larger one that we can actually measure out distances to come up with the right distance for the ordinance. I just don't have the resources.
With accurate distances.
Yeah. So
I apologize, which ordinance is this?
this is for creating a vape ordinance, a vape shop ordinance. Yeah. So anyway, that's just wanted to give an update. And the final update is I had gone to planning and there was discussion about the short-term rental and their potential ordinance. They're working through the details. And I think there are some questions about the process. What I think it is right now is that they're going to bring that to council. Then council is going to review that and we're going to find out, is there a consensus among council or does council want to bring the public in? Like what happens after that? Because if it's something that is going to cause a lot of, that the public's going to want input on, then council may want to consider doing something with the public or sending it back.
I think Councilperson Carlson also wanted to comment on that.
Can I comment on that? The Planning Commission completed their work on this topic, and they looked at what I had submitted to them, and then they did some other research on their own, came up with some other things that they thought would be important to be part of it. The plan is that at the June 18th meeting, because we're going to be on the hook for a working session, what I propose to do is to have a clear presentation, maybe even a draft of the ordinance, but at least a presentation that says, these are the elements that Planning Commission recommended, and here are other elements that we then, in a working session, say, do we want them? In residential and commercial, yes, no, in industrial. Go through so that we have the structure, the framework, to then create an ordinance, but at least have the framework of what we council together all would like to see. And then I agree, hopefully Paul can get the word out, or we can all get the word out, so we get some interested public people coming to the working session. And if we have good inputs on the working session, then that's great. If not, maybe we have to have other working sessions. I mean, once we get an ordinance, we have to go through the public session anyway, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of what we wanted to do. We wanted one more step. Remember, we talked at a very high level back in November about the ordinance, and this will be at a more detailed level so that we can make some decisions on what we think should or shouldn't be in it.
Just for clarity, it sounds like instead of Frankensteining what we currently have, we're starting fresh with a new ordinance, which I think will
Right.
be a better vessel to receive public input, because we're starting fresh. And I hope that will draw more public participation, so.
And I would say there's no need to rush it. It's the ordinance, actually drafting the ordinance is the last step. We just really have to get something that everyone feels more or less comfortable with.
Do you have anything else, Councilperson Biden?
No, I'm done, thank you.
Question, Madam President?
Yes.
Just for clarity, you said about, and I appreciate the term because it made me laugh, Frankensteining it. Does that mean that the ordinance on the books for B and Bs would be superseded by it, or is it in addition to the B and B ordinance? Is that what I'm understanding, or is it not?
So the current ordinance, it's interpreted to include Airbnbs. They're not mentioned by name, right? So I think once we have something with more specificity on the books, I don't know how that works. I think it supersedes, but I'm not sure. Would we need to also change the existing ordinance?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the changes you were going to make, the new ordinance would probably strike provisions of the old ordinance and replace them with new language.
Right. Councilperson Carlson, anything else to report?
Putting on my other hat, general government hat, also at the June 18th night, we'd like to carve out some some time then to go through how we're doing so far through 5 months. Then we can all go away this summer and think about what's going to happen for the budget in the fall. But so I'm going to be working with Patty and Paula and pulling that together. And so we'll have that as part of the session on the 18th as well. That's all I had.
Okay, great. Councilperson Applebaum.
Well, thanks to the good work that everyone has done on this board, all the things that I have to discuss have been discussed already, so thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Councilperson Scherer.
No report.
Thank you. Councilperson Stump. We can't hear you, unfortunately.
Can you see us? Can you chat? Can you chat us?
Should I call him? Oh, no, he. WhatsApp him.
Yeah.
See, I saw a little mute pop. I thought he may be muted himself on that side.
Okay.
Oh, yes, call me. You'd have to call. Continue. Oh, no. Is this public?
I think if we can see it, they can see it.
I can't. Let someone read that to me, too. I can't read the last four. Can someone read
It's
the last?
8992. Just in case it wasn't on the screen at home.
That's an awesome.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So, all I was going to say was, I don't have a whole lot to report because I've been in Spain the past 2 weeks, other than I made myself available to residents to help answer any questions or concerns or just point them in the right direction with general things when they reach out to me. So, I know when I first ran for office, because I do travel a lot, that was an issue of concern of would I be available. So I would just like the record to show that I made myself available on vacation halfway around the world, including being at this meeting at 2:30 in the morning. That's all I have to report.
Excellent. Brownie points for you. Thank you. Hang on. All right. Discussion items. So we've been talking a lot about how information flows among council members. And one piece of feedback that I'm routinely getting, and Paul is routinely getting, and I don't know about any of you, is that obviously because of sunshine, we need to work in groups of 3 or less, but things are abundantly clear for those 3 people, and then for people who fall outside of that committee, they are not so abundantly clear. So we feel a little bit out of the loop on spending or updates to plans or orders that are submitted. So what I'm going to propose, and I'm giving you a little precursor to it this week, and then we can workshop it next time. I would love if we could all submit our council member reports that we just did verbally in written form, and they'll be part of the packet so that people have time to review them ahead of time and bring their questions and do their research. To help you do this, we're going to build out as a starting point tracking sheets with your major projects by committee. So Public Works will have one, and then the members of that committee plus Paula will have editing access. Public Safety will have one, et cetera. And whenever you work on an item that's on your list, you would just put in the notes section like the date and the last substantive work that you did on it. There would be a cost column for any cost incurred. Obviously, that's a little more complicated with Public Works, but we'll work this out to a point where it's not a lot of work, but Paula can just pull those 5 documents every week and put them in the borough packet, and we can all have more visibility into what's going on in each committee. Obviously, we still want to have conversation amongst ourselves. We still want to have these great meetings where we discuss things live, but I think it's going to help fill in some of the cracks for some people. Any comments as I get those starting point documents worked up for next time? Anything that I should make sure to do or not do there? Yes.
Ori and I had a conversation today about this, and this is just a matter of mechanics or whatever, and its relationship to Sunshine Act and so forth. And I love the idea. Okay, so I support it. But is there how are we disseminating it? How many people can look at it at one time? I'm sorry to bring all this up, but I know when I send an email, I get a little nervous sometimes because I'm like, oh, was it 3 or 4 people that I emailed to? So how does this fit into the digital realm of the Sunshine Act?
I can say what I plan to do, and then you can say if that sounds okay. Does that work?
Sure. Fair enough.
Okay, so only 3 people would be able to edit the document. Paula does not count towards Sunshine, and she would be the one who would be pulling the documents and putting them into the council packet. Obviously, it would be nice if other people who couldn't edit it had viewership rights. I think that the law is probably silent on that. There's probably no precedent yet, but.
Yeah, the issue always just becomes, there can't be deliberation by a quorum. So, as long as it's restricted and any deliberation actually occurs at the public meeting, then it's fine.
Oh, wait, just to clarify, so, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Okay.
please.
So I've asked this with previous solicitors.
Sure.
So, and I understand the issue is that in the digital realm, the Sunshine Act really hasn't been tested very much. So I assumed, like what we're talking about here, that you could have 3 council people on editing or commenting rights on a collaborative document and the rest on viewing. But as David said, that what's different from that than sending an email to 7 people? Now, if Paula grabs it and puts it in the agenda packet, that seems completely fine because it's going to the agenda packet public meeting. But are we okay with people looking at it between meetings if they're not? How do you feel about that?
Look, it runs into a little bit of a gray area where can it be interpreted as if there is some kind of deliberation or internal discussion or government business that's being done behind the scenes through comments that are out there that people are viewing, and then they're able to sort of have a discussion on it, and is the end result that you have a quorum discussing these things outside of the public. So I think restricting it makes sense both for the appearance and also just to avoid, kind of linking together all these different separate non-quorums and coming to the conclusion that there's a quorum discussion actually going on. So I think restricting it to just the 3 people that are working on it for that committee or that particular issue, having it put in the agenda packet, and then coming before you publicly for everybody to discuss, I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think that's a great starting point. Again, we can discuss this next time. We'll start there and see how it evolves. But I think if any member of council wanted to see it in between, Paula would just screenshot it and send it in an email, and that would be perfectly fine. So that's how I think a good jumping off point. So for next working session, we have that. We have the budget, 5-month year-to-date, new ordinance on short-term rentals, and then I heard mention of talking about the permit process for events, and I think we should do that sooner rather than later if it's coming up as an issue, and Wes would like to discuss that with us. That's a lot, so we'll see if we get through all of it, but is there anything else that anyone would like to add to the working session agenda for next time that I might be missing? Okay. One more item on the agenda is the Yardley Borough Guidelines for Council. So this is the second time this is before you. I did receive a few changes. One is a typo that Councilperson Stump pointed out under participation. It says attendance at meetings to constitute a quorum shall include physical attendance, and attendance should be stricken there. And then Councilperson Finer had some other comments to make. One is that we would like to make the maximum of 30 minutes prior to discussion. Sorry, I'm on page 10. It says that if public comment exceeds 30 minutes, the remainder of public comment shall happen at the end of the meeting. And this is because sometimes we have, like when we have the big Yardley Inn presentation, or if the police are doing a big presentation and we have a lot of people here, we want to make sure that we timely get to their business and they're not waiting all night. With that being said, Ori made a great point that we should reserve the right to not cut it off if we feel like we're having really good dialogue. So I was going to add that declarative language there. And then the other one was about making personal references. Where's that? Can you help me?
Yeah, go to the very top. Yeah, 5 of the bold, like all the way, like
Oh.
in the very beginning. Yeah.
So under preservation of order and decorum, when members are about to speak in debate or to communicate any matter to the council, they should respectively address themselves to the president, confining their remarks to the subject before the council and avoiding personal references to any other member of council. I think this was to try to limit like personal jabs, but Councilperson Feiner made the point that it could be taken to mean like they can't say, hey, I worked with David or I worked with Kim on this, so it's a little bit misleading. So I think we'll just stop at subject before council, period. And with all of that, I would entertain a motion to approve with those changes, if they were clear to everyone.
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion was made by Councilperson Feiner, seconded by Councilperson Scherer. Any other changes or comments on these?
Sorry, Madam President.
Yes.
So it says, just so I'm clear, it says in the second line of guidelines for order that use Robert's Rules of Order as a model guide. So I'm assuming from that comment or statement that there is some flexibility because not all of us are experts in Robert's Rules of Order, though I have it memorized. No, I'm just kidding. Right. That we use that as the basis for decorum and so forth, but sometimes we slip.
Yeah, so-
Is this going to be punitive?
No, so these rules of council were drafted with Robert's rules in mind. So by reading these, you understand most of the important tenets of Robert's rules. But no, I'm not going to eject you from council chambers if you don't address all your questions to me.
Thank you, Madam President.
Any other questions? Yes.
Well, likewise, just to clarify, and you and I went over this, but for everyone else's benefit. So number 34, section 5, there was a point there where it said, there shall be no debate permitted between members speaking from the floor. There shall be no debate permitted between members of council. All comments should be addressed to the president to maintain decorum. And you made a very good point that things can get messy, and we've seen that happen. So that makes a lot of sense. But I want to clarify something that just sometimes it's helpful for us to have dialogue, and that as we discussed, this doesn't take away our ability to have dialogue. It just means we go through the president to do that, so that there's some level of control over it. Just because the Sunshine Act is such a limitation, it's the only time we get to sit together. We don't want to lose that, especially being a small town.
Yeah, I would say that these are going to be very loosely, if at all, applied during our working sessions. That's the time when we can free-for-all discuss everything and really have great, robust conversations. I think we're not always going to enforce them in these regular meetings, but it's really good to have something on the books if things get out of order to call it back, like, hey, just talk through me, don't yell at each other, type of thing. And it does happen. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously, 7-0. Unless there are any other additions, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion was made by Councilperson Siegel Morris, seconded by Councilperson Scherer. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye.